United Nations warns of global consequences over Israel-Iran strikes. Air India crash probe focuses on engine and flaps. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. This is World Today. I'm Otto Othman. Iran and Israel targeted each other with airstrikes early today after Israel launched its biggest ever offensive against its longtime foe. Air raid sirens sounded in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, sending residents rushing into shelters. Without commenting on casualties, the Israeli military said rescue teams were operating at a number of locations where fallen projectiles were reported. Several explosions, meanwhile, were heard in Iranian capital Tehran. The Israeli strikes on Iran throughout the day and the Iranian retaliation raised fears of a broader regional conflagration. Iran's state news agencies said Tehran launched hundreds of ballistic missiles at Israel after Israel blasted Iran's huge Natanz underground nuclear site and killed its top military commanders. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, accused Israel of starting a war, as Iran said its nuclear program is only for peaceful purposes. Iran's UN envoy, Amir Said Iravani, said at least 78 people, including senior military officials, were killed in Israel's strikes on Iran, and more than 320 people were wounded, most of them civilians. He accused the U.S. of being complicit in the attacks and said it shared full responsibility for the consequences. Meanwhile, the United Nations has warned of serious regional and global consequences following Israel and Iran's exchange of airstrikes, urging restraint and renewed diplomatic efforts. At a Security Council emergency session on Iran, UN Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, said the impact of the attacks has already been felt throughout the region, with neighboring countries closing their airspace and putting their security forces on high alert. DiCarlo also reaffirmed UN Chief Antonio Guterres' condemnation of any military escalation in West Asia and noted the obligation of member states, in accordance with the UN Charter and international law, not to use force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. She noted that it is important to avoid a growing conflagration which would have enormous global consequences. DiCarlo highlighted that a peaceful resolution through negotiations remains the best means to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. On a related note, oil prices soared and stocks sank yesterday after Israel launched strikes on Iran, prompting retaliation from Tehran and stoking fears of a full-blown war. Oil futures rocketed more than 13% at one point before coming back to gains nearer 7%, reigniting worries about a renewed spike to inflation. After a down day in Europe and Asia, Wall Street indices spent the entire day in the red before finishing the day down more than 1%. The dollar climbed higher while gold was close to its record high of above $3,500 an ounce set in April, having added around 30% since the start of the year. David Morrison, senior market analyst at financial services provider Trade Nation, said the drop in equities and rise in safe haven assets all go to show just how fragile sentiment remains in the face of major geopolitical events. While Friday was a decisively negative day for equities, analysts described the selling as orderly. Steve Sosnick of Interactive Brokers said investors are paring back some risks, but this is hardly a panicky sell-off. The market is partially in a wait-and-see approach to what happens over the weekend because it is a very fluid, volatile situation. But further escalation would add more upward pressure to oil prices. French President Emmanuel Macron revealed that next week's United Nations conference on a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine in New York had been postponed but would be held as soon as possible. Macron made the announcement after Israel pounded Iran in a series of air raids, striking 100 targets, including nuclear and military sites.
Si nous devons décaler la tenue de cette conférence pour des raisons logistiques et sécuritaires, dans la mesure où les dirigeants de l'autorité palestinienne ne peuvent rejoindre les Nations Unies, elle aura lieu au plus vite. Et dès les prochains jours, en lien évidemment avec les dirigeants de la région et plus particulièrement avec l'Arabie saoudite, une date sera refixée.
Without being more specific, Macron said in early June that he expected the conference in New York to take steps towards recognizing Palestine. He reiterated France's determination to recognize a Palestinian state under any circumstances. He stressed that the postponement of the conference should not undermine the determination to move forward with the implementation of the two-state solution. Ukraine said it has received 1,200 unidentified bodies from Russia as part of an agreement reached at peace talks in Istanbul. According to the Russian side, the remains belong to Ukrainian citizens, including military personnel. Moscow said last week it would unilaterally hand to Ukraine the remains of 6,000 killed soldiers in total in what Kyiv said would be an exchange. The agreement had appeared in doubt earlier this week after Russia accused Ukraine of not coming to collect the first set of bodies, and Kyiv said Moscow was playing a dirty political game. Earlier this week, Russia said it handed over the remains of 1,212 killed soldiers in the first stage of the agreement. The deals to hand over killed soldiers and exchange captured soldiers are the only agreements to have come out of 2 rounds of peace talks in Istanbul. The prisoner exchanges are one of the rare areas where the war rivals have been able to agree after more than 3 years of conflict that has claimed tens of thousands of lives. Still ahead, Trump approves U.S. Steel-Nippon Steel partnership. Investigators have recovered a black box recorder from the crash site of a London-bound passenger jet that plowed into a residential area of India's Ahmedabad city, killing at least 265 people on board and on the ground. The Air India Boeing 7878 Dreamliner issued a mayday call shortly before it crashed around lunchtime on Thursday after lifting barely 100 meters from the ground. The Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu Kinjau Rampu informed that a flight data recorder or a black box had been recovered, saying it would significantly and aid the investigations. A source that the investigation into the plane crash is focusing on the engine, flaps, and landing gear, as the aviation regulator ordered safety checks on the airline's entire Boeing 787 fleet. Air India and the Indian government are looking at several aspects of the crash, including issues linked to engine thrust, flaps, and why the landing gear remained deployed as the plane took off and then descended within moments. The probe is also examining whether Air India was at fault, including possible maintenance shortcomings. The source added a possible bird strike is not among the primary areas of focus, noting that the team of anti-terrorism experts are part of the investigation process. At least 4 people were killed and 9 others seriously injured in a motorway accident in western France involving a bus carrying a group of Ukrainian students. Local state official Emmanuel Aubry said all 4 people who died were adults, and the bus was the only vehicle involved in the accident. The Ukrainian embassy in France said the group included teenagers aged 15 to 17 traveling back to Ukraine after a school exchange trip. After speaking with passengers, Ukraine's ambassador to France, Vadim Omelchenko, noted that the embassy is in contact with the families of the victims, adding that some children have managed to reach their parents. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a social media post that 3 of the 4 killed were Ukrainian citizens. He added 2 more people are in critical condition and French doctors are fighting for their lives. The French Labour Ministry informed that 18 other passengers had sustained minor injuries when the bus overturned on the motorway outside the town of Degré in the Southern region, 230 kilometers southwest of Paris. Local prosecutors revealed that the two Ukrainian drivers had been detained on suspicion of manslaughter and involuntary wounding. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order approving a partnership between U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel after the companies reached agreement on U.S. national security guarantees. Now, the deal brings an end to the long-running saga over foreign ownership of a key national asset, which began in December 2023 when U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel announced plans for a $14.9 billion merger. Nippon's acquisition of U.S. Steel was held up by former President Joe Biden, who blocked it in his last weeks in the White House on national security grounds. Trump initially opposed Nippon Steel's takeover plan, calling for U.S. Steel to remain domestically owned, but he threw his support behind a partnership in May. In a joint statement, U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel said Trump has approved the company's historic partnership that will unleash unprecedented investments in steelmaking in the United States, protecting and creating more than 100,000 jobs. In addition to Trump's executive order approving the partnership, the companies have entered into a national security agreement with the U.S. government, which calls for approximately $11 billion in new investments to be made by 2028. The announcement follows a review of a deal that the government's Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., which is tasked with analyzing the national security implications of foreign takeovers of U.S. companies. In another development, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and U.S. President Donald Trump held a phone call yesterday in which they discussed tariffs and Israel's attacks against Iran. Now, according to Japanese Foreign Ministry, Prime Minister Ishiba reiterated Japan's views on the U.S. tariff measures, taking into account the results of the Japan-U.S. consultations on the U.S. tariff measures to date. It added that two leaders concurred to accelerate the consultations between the ministers in charge in order to achieve a mutually beneficial agreement. Trump has sought to leverage his tariff threats to strike bilateral trade deals with many countries, including U.S. ally Japan. Tokyo's chief tariff negotiator, Rosei Akazawa, said Japan will remain steadfast in its request for a review of U.S. tariffs and would not accept a partial agreement. On the diplomatic front, the two leaders agreed to remain in close communication on Israel's strikes against Iran that began yesterday. Japan has condemned Israel's strikes by calling them escalatory, while the U.S. has called those a form of unilateral action and said Washington was not involved. A global ocean summit wrapped up with world leaders taking major steps towards marine protection and vowing a showdown when nations meet to negotiate rules for deep-sea mining next month. Now, more than 60 heads of state and government joined thousands of business leaders, scientists, and environmental campaigners over 5 days in the southern city of Nice for the UN Ocean Conference. There was unanimous praise for efforts to ratify the High Seas Treaty, designed to protect marine life in the 60% of oceans that lie beyond national waters. Now, some 19 countries formally ratified the pact at Nice, taking the overall tally to 50, but 60 nations are needed to bring the treaty into force. France's Oceans Envoy said numbers would be reached by September, and the treaty should take effect by January next year. The High Seas Alliance welcomed the incredible progress, but urged all remaining nations to ratify without delay. France and like-minded countries also vowed to block any effort to permit deep-sea exploration at negotiations over a mining code at the International Seabed Authority next month. But for all the rhetoric, a global alliance opposed the deep-sea mining only attracted 4 new members at Nice, raising to 37 nations. Chinese authorities on the southern island of Hainan have evacuated thousands of people, closed schools and halted rail services ahead of expected landfall of Typhoon Wuip. Now, the China Meteorological Administration said Wuip, the first typhoon to make landfall in countries this year, formed over the South China Sea on Wednesday. More than 16,000 people have been moved from construction sites, low-lying flood-prone areas and regions at risk of flash floods, while over 40,000 working on boats had been moved ashore. Palm trees in Hainan waved violently in the wind, while other trees toppled onto deserted roads as workers raced to clear the debris and pouring rain. Wuip is expected to bring torrential rain exceeding 100 millimeters across 6 cities and counties, as well as winds of up to 101 kilometers per hour. Hainan has stopped high-speed rail services, and its southernmost city of Sanya closed schools and tourist sites, as well as suspending all flights at its airport. China has endured spikes of extreme weather events from searing heat and drought to downpours and also floods for several summers running. Next up in sports, Leverkusen's Ritz joins Frimpong in Liverpool. Kicking off our sports segment, Premier League champions Liverpool have agreed a fee of €136.3 million to sign Germany's attacking midfielder Florian Wirtz from Bundesliga club Bayer Leverkusen. Now, British media reported that Wirtz is expected to sign a 5-year contract with the fee comprised of a €117.5 million upfront amount and a further $18.8 million in add-ons. Now, the fee would make Wirtz Liverpool's most expensive signing ever, ahead of Netherlands centre-back and captain Virgil van Dijk, who joined for £75 million in 2017. With 2 years left on his Leverkusen contract, Wirtz was also the subject of interest from German champions Bayern Munich and Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. Now, the German international bagged 16 goals and recorded 15 assists in 45 appearances for Leverkusen last season as they finished second to Bayern. Now, Wirtz would become Liverpool's second edition of the transfer window after they signed Dutch right-back Jermaine Frimpong, who was teammates with Leverkusen. In another transfer news, Real Madrid have signed 17-year-old midfielder Franco Mastantuono from Argentine side River Plate on a 6-year contract. The Spanish outfit had agreed to sign Mastantuono for about €45 million last week, and the talented teenager, who can also play on the wing, will be a Real Madrid player from August 14th. Having come through River Plate's youth system, Mastantuono was part of the first team in the 2024-25 season. In February last year, he became the youngest scorer in River's history. He also became the youngest at 17 to play an official match for Argentina when he featured in their World Cup qualifier against Chile last week. Mastantuono had been linked to top European clubs such as Manchester United and Champions League winners Paris Saint-Germain after a stunning free kick in River Plate's Super Clasico win over Boca Juniors in April put him in the spotlight. Mastantuono is Real's third close-season recruit after they signed Premier League defenders Dean Huijsen and Trent Alexander-Arnold. On to Club World Cup news. Inter Miami will have to rely heavily on Lionel Messi's firepower as they prepare for tomorrow morning's opener against Al Ahly, which coach Javier Mascherano forced to reshuffle his back line due to a string of injuries. Now, fullback Jordi Alba, fellow defender Gonzalo Lujan, and defensive midfielder Yannick Bright have all been ruled out of the Group A clash at the Hard Rock Stadium. Alba, one of Messi's former Barcelona teammates, is sidelined with a hamstring issue. There were also concerns regarding the fitness of centre-back David Martinez.
Bueno, sí, David tuvo una molestia ayer. Veremos, hoy no quisimos tomar ningún riesgo. Veremos cómo evoluciona. Esa es la realidad. Y en cuanto a, obviamente, a jugar acá, siempre, más allá que no es nuestro estadio, jugar en tu ciudad es un plus para nosotros. Con respecto a Leo, no, llega bien. Ha tenido quizás durante la temporada algún momento donde tuvimos que prescindir de él por alguna molestia, pero ha jugado los últimos 15 partidos nuestros, salvo el partido de Dallas, que dimos descanso a todo el mundo porque nos jugábamos la vuelta de las semifinales de Champions. El resto lo ha jugado sin ningún inconveniente. Hemos tenido la suerte de que ha descansado en uno de los 2 partidos de la selección argentina. Ha llegado sano, que es lo más importante, y después nada, tenemos las mejores expectativas teniendo a Leo. Como decimos siempre, tratar de ayudarlo, tratar de generar un entorno al lado de él donde nos dé la posibilidad que él esté cómodo y que pueda hacer lo que nos tiene acostumbrado. Pero bueno, es nuestra obligación tratar de generarle ese entorno para que él pueda brillar.
Now moving on to tennis. Top seed Zheng Jiwen beat home favourite Emma Raducanu 6-2, 6-4 to move into semi-finals at the WTA 500 Queens Club Championships in London. Raducanu displayed some of her best play, but ultimately fell to Olympic champion in front of a packed crowd. Raducanu took a medical timeout after the first set, having struggled with back spasms over the past few months. She played better in the second set and was leading by a double break, but she could not keep the big-hitting Zheng at bay. The 22-year-old was given a true physical test by Zheng, but it was another defeat that showed the gap between the British #1 and the world's very best. China's Zheng will face Amanda Anisimova in the semi-final after the American beat third seed Emma Navarro 6-3, 6-3. In another match, Australian Madison Keys continued her best season with a run into semi-finals. She rallied from a set down to dispatch Dinah Schondler 2-6, 6-3, 6-4, playing the first women's tournament in Queen's Club in over 50 years. Keys is looking confident after a solid clay swing, edging into the Final Four in 2 hours and 6 minutes. The #2 seed kicked off the 2025 season by winning her maiden major title in Melbourne. She will next take on Tatiana Maria in the semi-final. From giant puppets to Inca Bridge, take a look at amazing offbeat stories this week. Life-sized puppet animals roamed Madrid as part of the Herds, an ambitious artistic project addressing the climate crisis through a 20,000-kilometer migration from Central Africa to the Arctic Circle. The initiative, led by artistic director Amir Nizar Zouabi, aims to provoke reflection on humanity's relationship with nature and the urgency of addressing climate change.
And I wanted to create a project that investigates a different relationship with nature, with the fact that climate change is real and is the biggest political problem of our time, because it involves everyone.
In Madrid, the puppet herd collaborated with the National Dance Company for a performance at Matadero, a cultural venue housed in a former slaughterhouse. Spectators expressed their concerns about environmental degradation during the open-air event. The migration which has already passed through the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, Senegal, and Morocco, will culminate in August this year at the Arctic Circle, showcasing an expandable assembly of puppet wildlife, symbolizing endangered habitats in a warming world. Indigenous Quechua communities in Peru's department of Cusco recently worked in an annual tradition to rebuild Huachaca, the country's last surviving Inca bridge, using traditional techniques preserved for centuries. Locals gather to craft ropes from hay, which are used to restore the 30-meter-long suspension bridge that hangs over the Apurimac River, which lies at 3,700 meters above sea level. The structure, located in the municipality of Quiju, is an enduring example of Inca engineering.
Siempre nosotros, el distrito, nos sentimos con este puente Inca que siempre se ha reconocido a nivel nacional, mundial, ¿no? Que es nuestro patrimonio cultural de la humanidad, ¿no? Que siempre este puente visitan de otros países, de otras naciones, así los policías todos, o sea que los turismos también vienen, ¿no? Entonces, de todo el país. Y también por ahí nosotros nos honramos con Dios con este puente Inca.
According to the Peruvian government's tourism board, the Huachaca Bridge was historically part of a broader system of roads built by the Incas to connect communities across the Andes. In 2013, UNESCO recognized the knowledge, techniques, and rituals associated with the annual renewal of the bridge as part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Black Cloud, a dramatic art installation, made a striking appearance in Kyiv's historic Sofia Square. Created by Ukrainian artist Oleksiy Say, the piece symbolizes the turmoil of war, complete with lightning flashes and thunderbolts sounds. The artwork is set to make its way to the Burning Man Art Festival in the United States later this year. Black Cloud measures 30 meters in length and 15 meters high and weighs nearly 8 tons. It has been crafted from 4 kilometers of fabric and is accompanied by chilling sounds reminiscent of artillery fire, explosions, drones, and sounds of military vehicles. The installation will be Ukraine's contribution to the Burning Man Festival in Nevada's Black Rock Desert in August. For the residents in Kyiv, the Black Cloud serves as a poignant reminder of the ongoing conflict. While some took photographs, others stood silently beneath its looming presence, reflecting on its significance. The cloud has been placed on the square on June 7th and dismantled on 9th June as it is being prepared to travel to Nevada. Well, that wraps up World Today. In our top story, United Nations warns of global consequences over Israel-Iran strikes. Now tune into Malaysia Tonight coming up at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. Till then, I'm Otto Othman. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thanks for watching. Have a pleasant day ahead.